Allie. I hope you're all in the middle of a wonderful book right now. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the list of books that I read in August. I read a total of 29 books this month, 15 of which were rereads. So the first book I read this month was One of Us is Lying by Karenina. 5 students walk into detention, but only 4 walk out, and now they're murder suspects. So my rating of this book was a 3.5 out of 5, and I'll explain why. My favorite part overall of this book was how it showed that you can't just put people, specifically like high schoolers and students, into categories and expect them to fit into these little boxes without anything coming out. People are three-dimensional. They can't just be how you want them to be. And I think this is a really good intro to mystery if you're looking to get started with that genre, or if you're looking for just a light mystery that's not too intense or too, keeping you on the edge of your seat to the degree where it's like you just can't do anything else. It was good and I wanted to know what was happening, but I wasn't petrified of what was going to go next. So next up, I read American Royals by Catherine McGee, which examines the idea of what would have happened if George Washington had become king instead of president. And specifically, the book follows 3 of his descendants: Beatrice, who's about to become America's first queen; Samantha, who's falling for the one guy she can't have; and Jefferson, who has 2 girls fighting over him. So the 3 are siblings, and I gave this book also a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was an interesting what-if question, but the book didn't really focus on the governmental aspect of it. It focused more just on the lives of these 3 people. And I thought that these 3 people could have been anybody. They didn't have to be descendants of George Washington, and there didn't have to be this what if question for the story to happen. So I felt like it was kind of lacking that information, which is what I was really excited about when I saw the description of this book. However, putting that aside, I thought the plot lines were really interesting and I liked the characters. And so I definitely enjoyed reading it. It was just missing that government aspect that I was also hoping for. So the next book was, and the first reread of the month, was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. Almost 2 years after Bryce's best friend is murdered by a demon, she must re-examine what she thought happened as new murders that appear the same start occurring. With the help of Hunt, a well-known fallen angel, she must work to solve the mystery and avoid falling for him at the same time. So this book was a 4.25 out of 5 for me the second time I read it. And I read it back in May, pretty soon after it came out, but since it's a really complex story with a lot of information going on at once, I thought I would reread it and see if I could get more than I did the first time, which I think I did. I'm glad that I reread it because I think I just am now going to be able to understand what happened and think about it more complexly than I would have been able to before. I was also able to see the foreshadowing that appeared throughout the book now that I know what happened at the end, and foreshadowing is one of my favorite literary devices to look for. And especially when I am rereading something, it's really fun to see the little clues that pointed out what happened. I did, however, feel like the world building in this book wasn't quite as impressive as it has been in other Sarah J. Maas books. I'm thinking specifically Throne of Glass and especially Court of Thorns and Roses, which is my all-time favorite series. But that's also might have happened because this world is more complicated than her other ones, so it takes more. And it was also only the first book, so the other ones are a complete series. So there's that kind of we might find out more in the next books, and that will add to the world. I will let you know the book was kind of slow going at the beginning, but once it did get going, it was really interesting, and I really do love both of the main characters. So after that, I read 2 books by Leigh Bardugo. First was King of Scars, which I'm not going to talk about too much because I have a video coming out, hopefully sometime soon, that goes really in depth with my thoughts throughout reading that book. The video was supposed to come out last month, but for some reason my computer won't let me export it, so I think I have to refilm it, but it will be out sometime this month, I do promise that. And then I also read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Alex Stern is an unlikely member of Yale's freshman class. High school dropout, sole survivor of a horrific, unsolved multiple homicide. Then she's offered a chance to attend an elite university on a full ride. But there's a catch. She must monitor Yale's secret societies, whose activities are more dangerous than imagined. I gave this book a 3.75 out of 5. For some reason, I wasn't expecting it to be fantasy, and I'm not really entirely sure why, because like all of Leigh Bardugo's books are fantasy. I think I just like didn't read the description well enough and just like missed the little clues that it was, but that was just me being stupid. I thought that the concept of this book was quite interesting and unlike what I've seen before. Unfortunately, because it was such a new concept and there was so much to it, a lot of the book was spent building the world, which meant that the story was kind of slow going. I'm holding out hope that the next book will be better because it was the first book in a series and that does often happen with the first book. So I'm holding out hope. We'll see how it goes, but fingers crossed that the next book has more in terms of plot and less in terms of information about the world. I liked the main character, but I didn't really fully get to know her as much as I would have liked, which I'm also hoping will be fixed in the next book, which I'm quite excited to read. I gotta say, I thought it was quite an interesting concept and I'm excited to see where it's taken. The next book I read this month was One of Us Is Next by Karenina McManus. A school-wide game of Truth or Dare continues Simon's gossip legacy at Bayview, but this time, Phoebe, Maeve, and Knox are the targets, and the dares have turned deadly. This is a sequel to One of Us Is Lying, but it's not absolutely required that you read it in this order. I would recommend it that way, but it's not a necessity. I gave this book a slightly higher rating of 3.75 out of 5 because I liked it just a touch better than the first book. I thought the Truth or Dare concept was more interesting than a simple gossip blog, and I also preferred the characters in this book a bit, but that's just personal preference. I don't think that it's necessarily like one is written better than the other, it's just this one to me was a little bit more interesting, but that could change for a different person. I also read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the prequel to The Hunger Games that focuses on Snow as a young man, and I rated this one a 4 out of 5. But I find it really, really hard to review this book because I find it really, really almost impossible to root for or sympathize with Snow because we know who he turns out to be. Additionally, the plot felt a little bit weird where it was like one plot here and then one plot here and then they were just smushed together back to back and there wasn't like a huge bridge between the two. So it kind of felt like it was two books that were just kind of put into one where there was that like kind of like not gap, but like piece in the middle that didn't connect them fully. But I liked it. I thought both main plot lines were interesting. My favorite part of the series, or not the series, my favorite part of the book was how it laid the groundwork for what the games became in the Hunger Games trilogy. I thought that was really interesting and I liked having that groundwork. So now like when I think about the Hunger Games, I realize like how it's changed and everything. So my next read of the month was Anna K by Jenny Lee. So this interpretation of Anna Karenina follows Anna K, who's struggling with her seemingly perfect life. Her brother Steven and his girlfriend Lolly are weathering their way through a sexting scandal, and Lolly's sister Kimmy is attempting to return to normal life after a career-ending injury ends her ice dancing career. The main plotline, however, follows Anna as she meets Alexei Voronsky, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and starts falling for him. So I gave this book a 2.75 out of 5. I'm not normally the person who rates stuff below a 3, mostly because I tend to enjoy what I read because I'm pretty careful about like what I pick up and I try to make sure that what I'm picking up is something that I will like. But this book just didn't cut it for me. I really liked how interconnected all the characters were between friends and family and siblings and like relationships and everything, but it was a little bit unrealistic, but in the sense where it's like kind of fun to like watch, or not watch, read. Speaking of watching, it reminded me a lot of Gossip Girl, but that's a segue. Unfortunately, I didn't feel like the characters were really all that interesting or relatable. They really failed to step out of that trope of spoiled rich kids, unlike in Gossip Girl, which is to me a pretty easy comparison between the two, where you did kind of like get to connect with the characters and see them outside of just the money they spent or the parties they went to. You got to see them as people. In this book, I just kind of failed to get that connection. The plot was also just really fast, especially at the end, and I was left with a lot of unanswered questions. There are also a lot of information dumps, including in places where it really should have been dialogue, where the author basically just told us what happened in a conversation instead of having the conversation itself, which I didn't really understand and made it kind of hard to get through because it's so much easier and nicer to read conversation than to read about what was said in a conversation. And I honestly don't see myself reading the next book in this series, unfortunately, which is something I rarely say. I like to finish a book and a series once I pick it up, unless I just really can't get into it, which I just failed to do with this book. Next up is a large set of rereads. I got it in my mind that we were going to reread the entire Shadowhunter Chronicles, like everything in there, and I almost made it, basically. Well, we missed a couple, but I'll tell you what I did reread. I read the Mortal Instrument series, the Infernal Devices series, Chain of Gold, and the Dark Artifices series in that order, and all of those were rereads. And they're by Cassandra Clare, if you didn't already know that. I'm not going to talk about these books too much because I covered them extensively in my favorite series video, which I will link up, I think this corner, maybe this corner, one of the two, we'll figure it out. So check that video out if you want to know more about these series. I will say, however, that they're all fabulous. Shadowhunter Chronicles is one of my absolute favorite worlds. It's my favorite set of multiple series put together, and I just think it's so well done and so well developed, and the characters are amazing, and I definitely recommend it. I also read for the first time the Bane Chronicles and Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, which are part of the Shadowhunter world. I'm not normally a huge fan of novellas. I don't really tend to read them because I think they just don't really contain that much information. They're kind of just like space holders while we're waiting for the next book, and I don't really tend to like that. I think it's just kind of like fluff. But because I love the Shadowhunter Chronicles so much, I thought that I would try these two sets of novellas, but they didn't really change my opinion. I like Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy slightly better than the Bane Chronicles, but I don't really see myself reading either of them again. I would definitely just stick to reading the novels. If you're a fan of novellas and you like the Shadowhunter Chronicles, definitely check them out. They're good in terms of novellas, but I just can't get myself to get on liking novellas. Just not my thing. So the first book I read after my Shadowhunters binge was They Wish They Were Us by Jessica Goodman. 3 years after Jill's best friend is found murdered by her boyfriend, she starts getting texts proclaiming his innocence, and her perfect senior year starts to fall apart. I gave this book a 3.75 out of 5 because I liked it, but I didn't absolutely love it. It reminded me a lot of One of Us is Lying, which I talked about earlier. It's kind of the same theme of somebody's killed and they're trying to figure out exactly what happened and who did it and how everybody is connected to it. I saw the ending coming a little bit before it was actually revealed, not like way in advance, but like a little bit before, which was a little bit disappointing because I like finding things out like right when they happen and stuff. I like the surprise in books. But there were also some like little surprises throughout that were kind of interesting to discover. I liked the main character, but I didn't feel like I really knew her all that well by the end, and I barely felt like I knew the other characters at all, which is really disappointing. I'm the type of person who likes getting to know a character throughout a book and a series, which is why I tend to prefer series over like standalone books, is because I like that connection that you get with a character, and I just wasn't feeling it with this book as much as I do with others. It was better than some, but it wasn't like top quality to me. My most disappointing book of the month, don't really know how to talk about this one, was After by Anna Todd. When Tessa moves into her freshman dorm, she meets Hardin, who changes her from the sweet, reliable girl she's always been. But their relationship remains filled with problems, which already you can tell where this is going. So I gave this book a 1.5 out of 5, which is the lowest rating I've given a book in a very, very long time. Simply because I didn't really like it at all. It was a really common trope, which by itself isn't a bad thing. I mean, like, I'm always up for reading a trope about like a bad boy changing a girl to like who she always is instead of like sweet reliable, while she changes him from like a monster into like a good guy. Like, always love reading that. So much fun. But this specific book kept recycling the same plot point over and over and over and over and over again, and you get where I'm going. It was just so repetitive that by the time I got like partway through the second book, I no longer knew like where one book ended and the next book began, and I just was seeing the same thing happen so many times that I was like, I'm going to put this down, and I stopped reading partway through the book, which I also hardly ever do, because it was just, I knew what was going to happen next. They were going to fight and something was going to happen, they were going to get back together, and it was just really upsetting. Additionally, there were a lot of trigger warnings in this book, so be aware if you do try to pick it up that there's definitely some trigger warnings in there. And don't make fun of me, I read Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, which is basically just Twilight told from Edward's point of view, and I gave it a 3 out of 5. I saw this book being described, this is not my own description, but I saw it being described and I thought it was perfect, as being like men, taking twice as long to say what a woman could have said in half the time. And I think that's entirely accurate. It's a lot longer than Twilight, which I didn't really know that until I really got into it, because I read ebooks most of the time, especially during quarantine, because I use a library more than I buy books. But it was really, really long, even compared to Twilight. And considering that we already know most of the plot, because if you've read this book, you've read Twilight, it just took up too much time. And if you're a big fan of Twilight and you really love them and you really like Edward, then go ahead and read this. I don't think you lose anything by reading it, but I also don't really think it adds a whole lot to the series. It's just Edward being angsty and depressing and upsetting and saying he's a tortured soul and how he's bad for Bella, and that stuff we get through the main series anyway. So it was just kind of okay, more of the same thing. Edward, get over yourself, let her choose what she wants, you can't just keep pushing her away. At the same time, it was kind of fun to see it from that point of view, but it didn't really add anything. So that's my review of it. If you want more, check out my Goodreads. I also read the duology of Killing November and Hunting November by Adriana Mather. When November is sent to a secret boarding school filled with the children of the world's elite strategists? Don't know the pronunciation of that, go me. They're training to become assassins, spies, and impersonators. But she quickly learns who she can and can't trust and discovers that somebody is out to harm her. Okay, we're just killing it with the speaking today. I gave both of these books a 3.9 out of 5 because I really liked them. I was kind of surprised by how much I ended up liking them, but they were a good mix of predictable and surprising, where I kind of was able to discover for myself what was going to happen, but I was also surprised at moments, and things that I wasn't expecting did happen. I can't really give you a favorite from between the two because I liked them in equal amount, which I don't find happens a lot with books in a series, because I often have ones where it's I like this one a lot better than this one, or slightly better than this one. It's hard for me to find a book series or a duology where I like them the same amount. So I liked that with this because I wasn't let down by one of them over the other. If you're looking for a similar book, I was thinking this the whole time I was reading it. If you're looking for a similar book, check out the Gallagher Girls series. Wow, tongue twister there. Which I've read a couple of times over the past, 8 years or so, 5 years, something along those lines, and I really like it. It's just really fun to read, and it has a lot of the same kind of plot points, not quite as much people trying to kill you, but close enough. And then the last book I read this month was Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi, which was also a reread. Juliet can kill people with her touch, which gets her locked up by the Reestablishment. But now they want to use her as a weapon. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 this time around, because I just didn't like it as much as I did the first time. It might be one of those series where it kind of loses its charm and its magic once you already kind of know what's going to happen. But for some reason, it just didn't hit me the same way it did the first time, which was disappointing because I remembered liking it a pretty decent amount. And I just, because of that, don't see myself rereading the rest of the series. But I definitely recommend it. If you like dystopian books, I would check it out. It's not a super long series. It's 6 books, but they're all relatively short. And if you like dystopian stuff, then I would check it out. But I don't really think I'm going to go back to it again. And so that was my very extensive list of books that I read in August. September is my last month before I start school. So I'm hoping to get another big reading month in, but we'll see how it goes with preparing for school to get started. If you want to hear what I'm planning on reading next month, be sure to check back probably in a week or so, maybe a little less, for my reading list video of what I'm going to read in September. And also be sure to check out my Goodreads, where I tend to publish my reviews a day or two after I read a book, so you can get more up-to-date notifications on what I'm reading and more in-depth reviews of them. And I tend to put those out pretty frequently because I'm reading pretty frequently, so they come out pretty quickly. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Now go read a good book.
you.